Hey, thanks for joining me. I am just about to interview this amazing couple in about 30 minutes. They're coming over. I'm going to interview them around the Moneyverse, what I've been doing on YouTube. I've been creating some vlogs. And if you want to know more about that, you need to go check it out. They're going to share with us how they have used the material that I've taught to help them win in money. So in a few weeks' time, you can be looking for that vlog. But what I thought I would do while I had this kind of set up and in this kind of arrangement, I thought I would share a little bit about what's on my heart recently, particularly for social media users. And it's around the topic, how and why you need to listen. So if you're tuning in right now, give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're there. Tell me who you are. I'd love to engage with you as well. And if you just give me a moment, I'm just going to also share this on my own personal account. And so I'm going to share that now. Great. So we're so happy that, I'm so happy that I can talk a little bit around what it means to listen. And this is what I've been convicted about recently. So James 1:19 says this: you should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I mean, think about those three things. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I cannot think of a better time or a time in the history of the world where this verse might be more relevant than it is today, especially with social media, with all the stuff that's out there. And let me tell you why I say that, for three reasons. One is because we live in a growing world of extremes. You know what I'm talking about? The extremes of life are in our face instantaneously. So, for example, when I think about 70 years ago, you know, when before the internet, if you were to be faced with something that's happening in a contradictory to what you believe, it would be in a gradual way. So, for example, you might have a relationship with your parents and you believe what they believe, and that's pretty much what you know. And then maybe if you go over to your aunt's and uncle's house, they would tell you a little bit about what they believe, and you would see that it kind of contradicts a little bit with your mom and dad. So you're kind of growing your understanding that the world is a little bit different than you suspected. And then perhaps you would go over to, school. Maybe school opens up a little bit. When you go to university now, it increases substantially. Now at university, you realize, geez, there's a lot of people that don't really agree with me. When you get a job, it increases again, and so on. And so over time, you grow in your ability to handle extremes. Nowadays, it's not like that. Now, as soon as you're handed a cell phone, you are introduced to a world of extremes. And hate speech is extremely prevalent. Can you relate to that? Can you relate to all the different things that are going on? All the different extremes that are happening. It almost feels like we have this angry world, and all the arguments are based on fear. Social media has become a place where we express our fear and our hate. Let me just read this. I came across an article by a lady named Zoe Williams. She's a journalist, and she writes this: the cliche is that Facebook is where you go to tell lies to your friends. Twitter is where you go to tell the truth to strangers. So maybe you've heard that before. How true is that? You tell Facebook, you tell lies to your friends, so you're putting out there to the whole world, look how amazing my life is, and all your best photos. I mean, you never have anybody putting on their terrible photos, putting it up there and saying, my kid was screaming all day today, and I'm a bad parent. No, it's look how wonderful little Johnny is. Look how amazing our life is. And Twitter is where you go and you kind of tweet your latest revelation or a quote that you really come across, some truth to strangers. Then she says this: as it pans out, it becomes increasingly clear that Facebook is where you go to be outraged among people who are outraged by the same things. Twitter is where you take your outrage to the enemy. Give me a wow face if you can relate to that, if you've seen that before. And it feels like in our Facebook communities, we have all these friends and we just want to get angry. And then at Twitter, we kind of attack people. And that's what you're seeing, these extremes all the time. Imagine if they were to do what James said to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Wow, would that not change the landscape of social media? So here's the second reason I think James's verse is so relevant for us today. The growing world of accessibility. So not just the growing world of extremes, but the growing world of accessibility. Now we have a university near us called UKZN, and there's a lecturer there named Craig Blewett, and he says this: accessibility is the ability to access online spaces through multiple devices at any time. This often results in what he calls spur-of-the-moment posts. Have you ever done that before? Have you ever done it? Just right below in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube on the rebroadcast, just right below if you've ever done that before. Just a quick, you kind of get irritated or mad and you respond, and right when it goes, you think, oh man, geez, I probably shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have posted that. I mean, we do it all the time in normal conversations anyway. We say something and then think that was a spur of the moment, a knee-jerk reaction. Imagine if we were to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, how that would change. He carries on and writes, in the pre-technology era, a person wanting to vent their anger would have to find the local newspaper's address, write the letter, and then post it. This cooling down gap does not exist with technology. He says new technologies, with their ubiquitous access, have changed us, largely without us realizing it. He says we've been changed from passive content consumers to active content producers. No longer are we kind of being consumed and just taking it in, consuming it, but we're producing the content now. But then he goes on to say, many people have readily assimilated the benefits of permanent access to publishing platforms, but haven't been as quick to realize the responsibilities that come with our new role of content publishers. We can now have our say, but we have not taken the responsibility of how to say it. And that's a problem. As Christians, we got to think this through. The growing world of extremes, the growing world of accessibility are sucking us into saying and activating and being a part of stuff that we should not actually be a part of. Give me a thumbs up if you agree with that. Here's the third reason why I think. The third reason is because of the growing world of self-expression. Self-expression. So Eli Finkel has this article. Here's the title of the article: How Self-Expression Has Replaced Love as the Most Important Part of Marriage. So he's talking about marriage here. But I think this applies to all relationships, even those on social media. And this is what he writes: America has witnessed three major eras or time periods of marriage. The first, which extended from the colonial period until around 1850. And he says this had a pragmatic emphasis in which marriage was primarily oriented toward helping spouses meet their basic economic and survival needs. Make sense? He says during the second time period, from 1850 to 1965, marriages had a love-based emphasis that placed a premium on helping spouses meet their love and intimacy needs. During the third time period, he says, from around 1965 to today, marriage has a self-expressive emphasis that places a premium on spouses helping each other with their authenticity and personal growth needs. He writes, the pursuit of self-expression has become a moral good in and of itself. So there's this, in marriage, in relationships, it's like you are there to help me self-express, not I'm there to sacrifice and to love you. It's not love-based any longer. And I think this spills over into so many of our relationships. He quotes a guy named Eric Kleinenberg who says, not long ago, someone who was dissatisfied with his or her spouse and wanted a divorce had to justify that decision. Today, it's the opposite. If you're not fulfilled by your marriage, you have to justify staying in it because of the tremendous cultural pressure to be good to one's self. What he's saying, our highest virtue is no longer love, but is self-expression. Now, this is a problem for us. It's a problem especially when it comes to social media, because we feel like we just need to get our word out there and we need to say our bit without first listening and loving the other person. This is also true in relationships. Imagine, though, if we were to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, like James tells us to. How could that change the landscape of social media? How could it even start to shape our hearts to look more like God would have us to look? Well, James goes on in those verses, and he says the way that we do this, the way that we can be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, is by humbly accepting the word that's planted in us. In other words, God himself, Jesus Christ, the word, and the word of God, his scriptures, they are planted in us when we receive him, and he's speaking of something of our identity. So we have an identity in God that if we were to access in its fullness, we would be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Let me show you how this works. Let's say that you are completely secure in your identity. Wouldn't that be great? Thumbs up if you would love to be completely secure in your identity. Now, if you are, then if you're in a relationship, if you're in a conversation with somebody, at that moment, you're able to listen. You're able to be quick to listen because you're not trying to get validation from them. You're not trying to get their approval. You've already got it in God. Your identity is secure in him. So you don't need their good opinion. You can listen not for your sake, but for their sake. The way that we often listen for our sake is like we kind of listen and we wait for a gap to say our bit. And sometimes we almost kind of, if they'll say something, yeah, maybe you've experienced this, put a thumbs up if you've experienced this before in your own conversations, and maybe you do it all the time. I do it. I got to really be careful not to do it. Somebody's speaking, they say something that triggers a thought in my mind, and I think, oh, I've got a story that goes with that. I then tune out from what they're saying. I'm no longer listening, and I'm trying to now wait for an opportunity or even manipulate an opportunity for me to jump in with my bit and say, oh, you know what? I've got a story. And now all of a sudden I've twisted the conversation back to me and all about me, and at that moment I stop listening. If I am secure in God, I can be fully present with somebody. And I'm not thinking about when do I get to say something or when can I come in here. I can actually listen for their sake. That's called love. I can love them. I can listen to what they're saying because they mean something to God and they mean something to me. I think that's where God would have us go. Now imagine if I'm really secure in my identity, how this would help me to be slow to speak. Because now I'm no longer needing to try and contribute. See, the reason we feel like we have to contribute something is because we want to make sure that we're heard in order to feel significant. And in order for them to think that we're significant and that we have something to contribute. Think about the next time, even in the next conversation you have, maybe even today, as you're listening to somebody, try to be aware, be self-aware of how you want to kind of push your way in and ask yourself why. Is it potentially because you feel like you need to contribute something in order to be seen as significant? Now, it's no longer just about you getting your word in there. It's about you getting your word in there in order to make you feel validated, which only God can do. If you are secure and if you have your relationship with God and if you know him as a father and you're a son and you're a daughter, you can be slow to speak because it's no longer about you trying to get significance out of this conversation. And especially on Facebook or social media. It's no longer about you trying to self-express, get your opinion in there, get your extreme view in there, make sure you're heard. Accessibility, it just tempts you into saying, okay, no, this is what I think, and I'm going to contribute. Slow down, think about what you're doing. And then think about how it's going to help you be slow to get angry. It will help you because your identity is so, I can imagine if someone's persecuting you. Someone's persecuting you. Imagine if just in the conversation they're misunderstanding you. Imagine if they're persecuting you. And I think about Jesus actually. It just comes to my mind now about Jesus standing before Pilate. and standing before the Sanhedrin, and they are just bringing false testimony. He knows that they're lying. It says they brought up people to lie about him. He knows they're lying. He says, and Pilate says, well, what are you going to say to these accusations? And Jesus stays silent. The chief priest asks him that, and Jesus stays silent. How could Jesus have stayed silent when false accusations are being made? It seems like he'd have every right to be angry and to let it out and just say, no, you're wrong, and I'm going to sort you out because this is an injustice. But he doesn't. He's silent. Well, obviously he knows he needs to go to the cross, so he has an agenda already in that moment. But he also knows that he's secure in God, and God has his back. God has his identity intact. He's a son. He doesn't have to get their approval. He doesn't have to justify himself. He's able to not get angry in that moment. When we knee-jerk react into anger, it's normally because of our own identity issues. We haven't yet been secure in God. But if you were, and if you are, God, you're at a place where you can actually allow even false accusations, and you can still love, and you can still listen, and not become angry. This is the kind of life that God wants for you. I want this kind of life. Give me a thumbs up if that's the kind of life that you would love to have. Monique, I'm glad you've just joined us, by the way. Nice to see Monique, my friend. Thanks for watching. So comment below, by the way. I'd love for people to comment, and even on YouTube, if you're watching the rebroadcast, just tell me, just in terms of your own understanding of identity, I'd love to even get that conversation going. So, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How do we do it? I want to finish with this acronym that I've been using. And I just thought about the word listen. I thought if I were to take that word listen, and if I were to break it down into something that's practical, something that can really help me in spur-of-the-moment conversations, or if I'm about to just send something on Facebook or write a comment on YouTube, if I'll run it through this acronym, this grid, if you will, if I'll run it through this, I think, and if we will run it through this, I think we'll be able to respond in a godly way. And here it is. Listen, the L stands for, is it loving? So is what I'm about to write or what I'm about to say, is it actually loving? Does it put the other person first? Is it something that I can say out of genuine love? The second is the I. Listen, L-I stands for, is it important? I think a lot of things that we say are not that important. I think sometimes, I'll say something and I'll realize, I don't actually think that contributed to the conversation. And if I thought about it for a moment and ran it through that question, is this really important? I might actually not say it, and I might not post it. L-I-S. The S stands for, is it selfless? Am I saying this to get something out of it for me? Am I saying this because I need some kind of identity affirmation? Or am I saying this because I actually have a concern for the other person and is putting the other person ahead of me? Is it selfless? L-I-S-T. Is it true? I think a lot of the things that we might say or that we say, if we were to ask, is it really true? Do I know this for a fact, or is it plausible fact? Meaning it's plausible, but it's not really true. Is it something that I've heard before? Can I actually validate this thing? Or am I just gossiping? Am I just regurgitating something that I've heard and I've never actually looked into myself? I think Facebook could be cleaned up in a massive way if people would first think, is this true before I post or repost? And it certainly might help us in our conversations, not to put stuff out there that we're not quite sure about. L-I-S-T-E. Is it edifying? Is this building the other person up, or is it tearing them down? If it's not building somebody up, and it's not building, I don't know why you'd want to say it. I don't want to say it if it's not building somebody up. I want to be more like Jesus in that situation. And then lastly, N. Is it necessary? So often I'll be in situations and somebody will add something and someone else will say, you know what, I was going to say the very same thing. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, then, you don't need to say that. Don't say it again. They'll come back and say what he said, and they'll just repeat. And I think, you know what, it might not be necessary for you to always put it in. And maybe you even know the kind of people, maybe you've talked to people before And they're always saying, oh, that's exactly what I was going to say. And this is, oh, I was going to say that. And it's almost like they kind of get caught up in just adding to the clutter of conversation. Imagine if you didn't do that. If we could just not add to the clutter and think, is it necessary? And if it's not, then take that opportunity to listen, to allow the other person more opportunity to speak. Can you imagine living like that? Being fully present with somebody, being secure in your identity. Can you imagine in your social media interactions, being secure in your identity, and you're thinking before you post or before you speak, is it loving? Is it important? Is it selfless? Is it true? Is it edifying? And is it even necessary? My friends, I hope this helps you. It's just been something that's been on my heart. I've been wanting to do it. I'm just getting into this live chat thing, and so it's a little bit I'm a little bit nervous when I do it because you can't kind of erase or delete. It's not like a vlog, but I'm hoping that it helps. And it's just thoughts that I've had this morning and wanted to share it with you. And I've been looking at this, preached on it not too long ago. So if you want to know more about what I'm doing, follow me on Facebook, obviously. Go to YouTube. I've got this vlog, and we're looking in a money series. I got a few more episodes. I think it will help you. It's based on my book, The Money Verse. And subscribe, put the notification button on there. I'd love for you to do that. Find me on Instagram, do all those type of things, please. And hopefully this is adding meaning to your life and giving you just some more tools to be with Jesus, to be like Jesus, and do what Jesus is doing, and grow in your identity and your security in him. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And I think it's about time now. This couple's coming. Going to interview them. I'm going to release that vlog in a few weeks' time. Look out for that. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bless you.